So again, welcome to Al-Hijrah Islamic Center. I think the best thing we begin all our meetings with is an opening prayer, and I would like to invite Reverend Linda from UU.
I don't know where I'm from. I'm a Unitarian Universalist of Northern Virginia and the world, and I serve the Acatink Unitarian Universalist Church in Burke, Virginia. I invite us now to center our hearts, open our minds, rest our bodies. Spirit of life and love, known by many names and no name, be with this gathering of beloveds in this place that has been a welcoming place to people of all faiths. We rejoice in the opportunity to be together, to inspire one another, as together we seek to help all people find their voice to build the common good. Amen.
Thank you, Reverend Linda. And I think we begin by having an introduction, and I'd like to have my co-chair introduce herself, and then I will introduce myself.
I'm a lay leader. I'm Carla Toenniessen. I'm a lay leader at Vienna Baptist Church and a leader with voice. And I want to share with you what led me to become a leader with voice. I'm going to start with probably how all of us are shaped, and that is a family story. My parents grew up very poor in East Tennessee during the Great Depression, and I think they are the ones who I learned from about do what you can to help people around you, because that's how life was in their community, where people had hardship, they were all struggling. And so it was the community coming together. I remember a story about my grandmother, Maddie, who was also very poor. And the story goes, I did not know her because she died before, she was very young, so I never knew her. But the story goes that if there was someone in the neighborhood who was hungry, that the neighbors would say, well, just go down there at that house, and Maddie Owens, if you knock on the door, will give you something to eat. Now, my grandmother, when I think about it, she did not have much at all, but she would try to pull together whatever she could share and do what she could. And so I think I really learned this from her and my parents, that I need to do what I can and to respond out of whatever I have to give, whether it's on a personal level, a regional level, national, or organization. I guess I'm a real believer of change and what people can do themselves with others. Okay, now out of that, I can give you a true confession, and that is before I started working with Voice, I had never been to a county town hall. I hadn't attended a state meeting. I probably didn't even know who my elected officials were, not very many of them. And certainly never met with one or negotiated with one. So becoming a part of Voice and a leader has helped me see a way at change that gets at the root that is quite powerful. It has given me access in a way I never knew would be possible, and it has stretched me. And so, as I said before, being able to give what I can, I'm finding that there's more that I can learn and do than I thought possible. Okay, I'm going to turn this over now to my co-chair to say.
Thank you very much, Carla. So our official timekeeper for the afternoon will be Chuck, and he's going to be holding some cards that, there you go, and he's great at this because I've seen him do it at UUCA, and it's for me as much as it is for any of you. But very quickly, I'm Saif Rahman. I'm the Director of Public and Government Affairs here at the Al-Hijrah Islamic Center. And what drew me to work, I've actually grown up in this masjid. I first joined this community in 1989 when I was 11 years old. and before this building was even open. And I remember the struggles that we had to go through with the county just to be able to open this building. And that was my first kind of exposure to getting involved, making sure that we get all the young people going out to go and attend Fairfax County Board hearings and try to explain back in 1989, 1990, that no, we're not here to mess up the neighborhood. We're only here to worship. And that kind of started a long journey for me. It actually culminated in my marriage in this institution in 2001. And see, he's already got the signs up. And in 2003, I was called to service actually abroad, where a friend of mine was a governing council member in Iraq and asked me to go and help with the elections law there. I said I would go for 6 months. I ended up spending 6 years. I was blessed to be the chief of staff to the first speaker of the Iraqi parliament, built the parliament structure there, and also helped to write the current constitution. And then my last position there was an advisor and chief of staff to the vice president, where I helped to draft the status of forces agreement between Iraq and the United States. I subsequently returned and have been involved in my community here since. So that's what calls me. It's seeing politics on a national level and then seeing politics on a very local level. And that's what drives me and continues. And it's driven for me as a Muslim from a verse that is in the Quran where it says, "O you who believe, stand firm for justice and witnesses to Allah, even if it be against yourselves or your kin." And that to me drives my personal push for voice. So let me get to a frame and why we're here today. Today is a success if we, as a collective group from all of our institutions, are able to have an understanding of what we're about to do on October 21st, our big action. That's the first part of this, and we'll consider that a success if everyone has an idea going into that. Also, understanding the picture of Voice's winter plans, right? We're going to get into what we're planning for the next few months after the fall action with the governor and others. And I'm hoping that you all are excited enough by some of these plans and some of these historic moments that we are actually standing on, that you not only will invite your congregations to come out, but get further involved, and that's when we'll get into the commitments period, and we'll have a discussion about that. So we'll talk about the fall action on the 21st, we'll talk about the picture for the action plan, and we'll talk about our strategy long-term, as well as our GOTV efforts, and eventually culminating in other voice actions. So without further ado, I think I'm going to invite Carla back up, and she will get into our rounds. Sorry, I went over, Chuck. Oh, I'm sorry. Good job. See, Alisa is on top of things. By the way, this was in the later part of the program, so I'm not over time. Around 4:27 is going to be the call to our afternoon prayer. You will hear the call. On your chairs, we have an explanation of what that call is. And we will pause for those of us that are Muslim, we'll go to the prayer hall to make the prayer. For those people of other faiths that are with us, our brothers and sisters, you're welcome to observe the prayer. If you'd like, you can just simply come to the back of the prayer hall, but please remove your shoes doing so. And you can simply just sit in the back of the prayer hall and observe the prayer. For those that don't wish to do so, we will have a program which Carla will continue to run here. So the call to prayer, you'll hear it resonating, and it's basically what is written on your little sheets that are on your chairs. Thank you, Alisa.
What I thought was especially, that was a little bit special today, and I just wanted to point it out, and that was Northern Virginia Hebrew congregation. So how many, who gave the turnout? Okay. How many people are members of your institution that are with you here today? Oh, they're giving me a hard time now, huh? Are some people that you met doing listening sessions?
Yes, there are people with us. There are 4 people here that we
All right. Really great work. And we're going to hear from Diana later, right? Okay, good. Okay. So my name is Alisa Glassman. I'm the lead organizer of Voice. And I'm going to spend the next little bit of time with you talking about power. And we talk about power a lot, right? And normally in the IF, we talk about that you need power for 3 things. That's how we've always talked about it. 1, to get to the table. I actually don't really need that, do I? Okay, 1, to get to the table, meaning really recognition, right? In order to begin to actually get a deal. So for us to meet with the governor with, right now we're having a hard time getting to the table with Comstock. But a lot of people are having a hard time getting to the table with Comstock. She's only set up 1 meeting, she's only set up 1 debate for this election season. Last year, I don't know how many people know this, it was 5 weeks before the action, and we weren't at the table with either Northam or Gillespie. So we had to spend the next 4 weeks really working hard, letting them understand why it was in their interest to get to the table and to meet with us. You need power to make a deal, right? Power negotiates with power. And you need power to keep a deal. And the last that I wanted to talk about today is that you need power to begin to reframe the debate. And Voice, this is where I think we are at as an organization. Because we have shown that we can get to the table with most of the power players in Virginia. Not all, but with most. We can make a deal, and we've made some really impressive deals. And we can keep a deal, because we've had to go after the banks, right, to actually keep that deal. Or around money for pre-K, or for any other issue to keep a deal. But today I think we have a moment in Virginia, we as an organization, to also reframe the debate. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that. Actually, there's an old African proverb. It's also been made into a rap song for those of you who are rap aficionados. Until the lion learns to speak, the hunter will always have the glory, right? Until the lion learns to speak, the hunter will always have the glory. And so until we begin to build the power that we need, others will be telling our story. I don't actually know how, oh. Okay. Power for what? So we're going to talk about why we're building this power, but first I wanted to call on Dr. Savage to talk a little bit about criminal justice reform, one of the top issues that we're working on. And then Diana, do you want to come up? You're going to be next.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. So I'm glad you're here, and one of the issues, as you can see, that we're talking about is restorative justice or criminal justice reform. One of the things we're looking at is how do we make reform in the Commonwealth of Virginia? What's going on in the Commonwealth of Virginia that even requires criminal justice reform? It sounds like a rhetorical question, but it's better to know so we know what it is and why we're doing what we're doing. One of the things that we have to understand is some of the facts that are happening in Manassas is that 80% of dismantling mass incarceration is going to happen on the state and local level. Not on the federal level, but on the state level and the local level, where you live, because most of the individuals who are incarcerated in our state and local jails. When we look at the state level, you're looking at 34, there's been between 1980 and 2016, a 314% increase in the number of people who are incarcerated, even though the number of crimes have actually gone down. So what we've done is become inventive on how to lock people up for things that we never used to lock them up for in the first place. Second thing is that we're understanding is that in Virginia, in 2016, there were 120,000 people incarcerated in our actual state institutions. If you put the city of Roanoke and Charlottesville together, that's what we're talking about. Imagine just locking up everybody in Roanoke and everybody in Charlottesville. That's what we've done in the Commonwealth of Virginia. Not because they've created, we're seeing more crime, but we're seeing less crime. We're just deciding to target people to put them in jail for things that aren't. Thank you. And so we're the 11th largest state when it comes to prison population. Even though we're only 19% black in 2016, blacks made up 37% of the actual prisoners, even though all data shows that blacks use drugs and all the other things at the same rate as everybody else, but they don't go in no one else's neighborhood. They just go in the black and brown neighborhoods. 80% of the people in Virginia prisons have a history of substance abuse or mental illness, so instead of treating people, we're just putting them in jail. We're not treating them at all. That's where a supermajority of this population is growing from. And if you commit a violent crime, when you get out, you're eligible for TANF, which is temporary assistance for needy families, and SNAP, which is supplemental nutrition for our children, basically. But if you commit a drug offense, you're not eligible. So armed robbery, you get out, you can, but low-level drug offense, you can't. Why? Because that's the majority of people that we're putting in jail right now. And so 85% of Virginia have to actually serve their time, and only, I see it. And we only provide education for them when they're 90 days out instead of trying to rehabilitate them throughout their time in there. So that's basically what's going on. And we're number one for locking up our youth. We're number one for locking up our youth. That's a problem. Prince William County doesn't have public defender's office. Arlington County has the highest per capita in state in arresting African Americans, 8-1. And then the Arlington Commonwealth Attorney literally had the nerve to say that we're not locking up enough people. We're not locking up enough people. We need to lock up more people, not less, and that mental health is not an excuse, and she doesn't believe that the school prison pipeline is even real. So we've got some challenges ahead of us with people who are living fantasy lands, and we've got to do something about that. Amen. Thank you, sir.
Hi, my name is Diana Ho, and I'm a sophomore at South Lakes High School. I'm on behalf of Voice. Voice has impacted my life in a way that nothing else could. Like many other adolescents, I'm diagnosed with clinical depression and anxiety. Before I share my story, with a show of hands, how many people have encountered issues with mental health for yourself, a family member, or a friend? Well, wow, that's a lot of people. You are not alone. For the past few years, I've suffered from my fair share of mental health issues. It started affecting my family, friends, and especially school. I was sure that I wouldn't be able to help myself, much less others. But one day, Meryl Pascoe came to do a listening session at Reston Regional Library. At that moment, I felt heard. I felt like I had the hope to change whatever was contributing to my mental illnesses. That's when I got involved with Voice. And now I feel that my job is to make other kids like me to feel heard too. I hope to better the community and introduce new ideas, such as separating a counselor's work, and so that they can focus more on a student's wellness, or even putting up positive mental health related posters at school, or even host assemblies to help those in need. I will continue to do listening sessions and hope to make fellow teenagers feel like they have a place in this world. I strive to make things better for myself, other kids, the community, and you.
That's a lot of courage, right? 16-year-old. I don't know if I would be able to stand up in front of all of you when I was 16. So how many of you are here because restorative justice is an issue that's important to you? How many of you are here because schools and lifting up our kids and using this moment to make sure that we have healthy schools is important to you and healthy kids? And for you, how many of you keeping families together is critical, both in immigrant and the Muslim community? And then lastly, affordable housing and transportation. Okay. So I said earlier that we have a moment, and I just want to talk about that moment and how we may begin to think about the action. As always, the politics And what we're going to ask specifically at the action is being worked out until the day of the action. But just to give between all of us, right? Confidentially between all of us? Yes? More or less? Okay. In and around restorative justice system, some of the things that we're beginning to think about, we've asked Attorney General Herring if he would give an opinion to end cash bail. This would be really important. We will find out at the action. We've asked him to be there. He hasn't confirmed yet, but he has said that he's considering it. So we will see what he answers. There are a handful of states that have begun to end cash bail. And when you look at them nationally, there was a report card that just came out. All of them got an F for how they are rolling them out. The only state that got an A was New Jersey. So not only would we be asking the Attorney General to make an opinion, we'd be asking our state, the governor, and others to lead on this in a way that is impactful, not racist, and making a huge difference. So we want to lead. And I think that's true for all of these when we're talking about making a deal and keeping a deal. We're not going to ask the governor or the attorney general on the 21st of October just to say that they're with us. We're asking them to lead. Those of you who've led a congregation or a team or a classroom, it's one thing to say something. It's another thing to actually lead because obstacles happen. And you've got to move and do something else. Someone else is going to get in your way. Something you hadn't predicted. So leading is very different than just saying, yes, I agree. And that's what we're going to ask. And that's what we're going to look for on the 21st as a group. The other issue that we're beginning to look at is what is the most effective way for us to work with our governor to decrease mass incarceration? Some states have begun, there are 5 states now that have decreased mass incarceration by around 30%. So one thought is we want to do 40% in the next 5 to 10 years. Another thought that we're looking at is that there should be no people with mental illness or drug addiction in our prisons or jails. That would decrease incarceration by 50%. There are 30,000 people in our jails and prisons right now. And so there's no place, people who have mental illness or drug addiction should get treatment. So those are the 2 things that the team is looking at right now. And we would be leading the nation in and around that and reframing the debate, right? Jail is not the place for people with mental illness or drug addiction. Around schools, the team is looking at what can we do to lift up schools, kids in schools? Right now, the national debate is about how do we lock down the buildings to make people safe. The buildings, not what do we do about the kids inside to build healthy communities and to make sure that we're lifting them up. So the schools team is looking at counselors, what it would take to have a counselor in every single school. After-school programming and quality summer programs, pre-K, and other things that would lift people up. So that's what we're beginning to look at, and again, asking the governor to lead around keeping families together. We've been working with our attorney general and other attorney generals across the United States. Again, what most of us have seen around attorney generals, that they've come out as a group, right? This is new, right? I mean, it's not new to see attorney generals. It's new since Trump, but they've been coming out as a group. What we want from our attorney general is something a little bit different. What would it look like if we had attorney generals saying, and we've given them some strategies around ways of keeping families together or making it harder to separate people, but to come together with bishops and denominational leaders and with business leaders. How do we begin to think about this different and lead in bigger ways? And so trying to help them around that. Around the Muslim ban, we're starting to do listening sessions. We're going to do a training here at Al-Hijrah on the 7th of October, and we did one at Adams. So we can begin to figure out what are some ways that we can lead around the discrimination that's happening because of the Muslim ban. Hey, voice, this is our moment. Turn to your neighbor and say, this is our moment. Turn to your neighbor and say, this is our moment to lead in Virginia and nationally. Around criminal justice, schools, and keeping families together. Okay? That's what this action is about. Is that clear? Right? This is our moment to lead in Virginia and nationally around criminal justice reform, schools, and keeping families together. So let's talk about how we're going to do that. So this is, when I talk about this is the moment politically, as I just stated, each of our voice issues that have come out of our listening sessions also have a national impact as well. So we can frame nationally by doing the work that we're doing here. This is Governor Northam's second year. This is the perfect year for us to really work strongly with him. I don't have my notes in front of me. Let me grab my notes. That's right, his first budget. He's something else that we know about him, and I'm I'm moving this in here, is that he always he's a moderate, right? And whatever he brings forward, he always briefs the speaker about it first. Voice, we are an organization of Republicans and Democrats. We are also an organization in the middle. So there's a real opportunity for us to work with him in the next 3 years. Attorney General Herring is ambitious. He wants to be the next governor. Both he and probably Lieutenant Governor Fairfax will be running. And we have gotten the attention of the Attorney General by our GOTV work. When we met with him back in June to ask him to make a consideration around cash bail, the first thing he said to us was, I noticed your GOTV work in 2018. And when we asked him about his priorities, we had shared ours around criminal justice and keeping families together. His were not that. He does care deeply about immigration, about the opiate crisis, and around hate crimes, but criminal justice was nowhere on his list. So when he came back to us and said, yes, I'll consider it, that's because of you, Voice, and the GOTV work that you have done. It was nowhere on his list. The House and the Senate and the House are very evenly divided, and that gives us another political moment. And then in 2018, we came out as an organization in both the Republican and Democratic Party. We were noticed by both. In 2019, as you probably know, all of the Senate and House is up for re-election. This would be a real opportunity for us to do major GOTV that year, and then going forward. And 2020 is the redistricting, right? So at the Assembly on the 21st, we are going to use it to reframe the debate. We're going to use it to demonstrate Voice is a state power player. Power negotiates with power. So we're asking you, say to your neighbor again, this is our moment. This is our moment to lead in Virginia and nationally. If we are bold and we are strong when it comes to demonstrating our power. Just like the AG noticed us, the other state power players will notice us too if we reach our turnout. It's not just 1,200 people, but we are working to turn out 200 returning citizens and people from the schools community. And last time we had 1/3 of the turnout was Muslim. Let's see if we can do that again. New institutions. GOTV, we set a goal of 450, and next year, 750, and we'll hear more about that in a moment. And then we'll ask people to make a commitment to be at the General Assembly in January. It's a 30-day General Assembly. Starts the 9th of January through February 6th. And the ask is that each of us works one day so that we can have teams of 10 there each day to keep the deal. And then lastly, we're looking at our governor and the AG and others to lead. And I put that in big letters because we talked about that earlier, right? Not just to say yes, but to lead. All right. Any questions or reactions to this? Yeah, Mark.
I have a question. When you said that we're looking to be nationally as well as other states, to me that's one of the first times I'm thinking of voice as something that's focusing nationally. Can you add a few more details? Is it because by setting an example for other states, or in what sense are we?
Yeah, good question. So all national change starts locally. In Maryland, when I was lead organizer in Montgomery County, we were able to get the DREAM Act passed, right? Our IF affiliates in Maryland came together. That year, there were only 8 states who passed positive legislation around immigrants. Only 8. The next year, there were 125. We were given a lot of credit for not only passing the DREAM Act, but also creating a momentum for national change. Okay? So framing it, and also doing it in Virginia, in a purple state. Other questions or reactions to the plan we just laid out? What do they say? 90% of an action is turnout? That's right. What are you thinking, Kurt? Turnout. Kathy? I'm sorry. What are you thinking? May. You're talking about no, the turnout, just in general, the reaction to this.
Well, I think that question about how do we fit nationally, you're saying we fit nationally because we're somebody who's going to stand up and support the issue. It's reminding me that this morning at St. George's we had a listening session that was dealing with mental health issues. And we had people in that, every person. This morning at St. George's we had a session dealing with mental health issues. And of the people who were in our circle, a number of them were faces we've never seen before. We saw the personal passion that there was from people who don't know a thing about how this all works, but the energy that was giving everybody else was strong. That fits with what you're saying about us helping the national energy.
Okay. Anyone else? Reactions? What does the quiet mean? Does this seem right? Is this the right way of us to think about the October 21st? Yes? Okay.
I think that the General Assembly, Michelle Nicolai, St. Francis. I think the General Assembly work is exciting because when I first got involved with Voice 4 years ago, I would say maybe like 3 years ago, if I'm remembering correctly, we had just started talking about state power. And I do remember thinking, being a little bit pessimistic of, gosh, how is this little group of churches going to get this state power? And we have it now, and that's exciting. And we're going to go show our power down in the General Assembly, and that's awesome.
Great. All right, last comment before call to prayer.
You know, I've been in Voice since it was established, and our track record of accomplishment is something that we all should be proud of. From the sidewalk outside of Al-Hijrah to holding the big banks accountable, to street lights, traffic lights, for stop signs, for athletic fields, for affordable housing, for our role in getting dedicated funding for Metro. But we are really at a historic moment. Last year, as a result of our GOTV, as a result of our action last year, as a result of our GOTV and the recognition we got from that, as a result of our action and our ambitious agenda, we have an opportunity. Alisa talked about the upcoming General Assembly, 30 days, and wanting us to be present often there. For this to happen, For this to happen, we need to introduce ourselves to every member of the Northern Virginia delegation. This has been largely accomplished in Alexandria and Arlington and somewhat elsewhere. So anyway, when I mention the commitment sheet at this moment, go for it. Since we're scrambling the agenda, I would like everyone in this room who has an appetite to meet their local delegates, their senators and delegates, to check that box there. There'll be, later on, we'll distribute the names of the local delegates with whom we have not met. This is really, really important. Not only does it enhances our ability to engage them in conversations in the halls and dropping in on their offices. And one final point, by being active in Richmond in this way, it strengthens us locally because everyone talks to everyone, not only within their own political party, but across the aisles. So by becoming well-known, being a presence in Richmond, it just enhances our power overall. So please, everyone, check that out. Okay. I did.
Good job. Thank you for stealing my thunder.
Oh, good.
Yes, we have a question.
I have a question about the call. I've always loved the sound of it. I didn't know what the words were, but I knew the call was prayer, and I love the sound of it.
Okay.
Does each caller have their own inflection?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Each caller, each country, each place will have a different rhythm, a tone. The words stay the same, the rhythm changes. So you can call it in several different ways. Khadija.
I was looking at the form, voice commitment part. They seem to be.
Okay, so hold on to that thought because we're actually going to, Robert stole our thunder on the commitments. We actually have a whole section on the agenda regarding the commitments. So if you don't mind.
Just the date, the rehearsal.
Aha, thank you for pointing that out. Thank you for pointing that out. That should be October 16th and not November 16th. Thank you, Khadija, for pointing that out.
Right, you will see on your agenda, it has the right date for the dress rehearsal at the bottom. Thanks.
Okay, so we've been talking about all of these issues, and we've been talking about these actions, and Alisa has been teaching about getting us to the places that we need to get together. And the plan of action that's coming up is essentially a whole program that we're trying to do. So in September and November, it's the Make the Deal. You remember, Alisa, why don't you put that up if you don't mind so we can actually... Okay, so in September to November, it's the Make the Deal, right? This is when the governor has committed to come and speak to the Voice membership, keeping in mind that this governor didn't believe that we'd have 1,600 people show up before the election. He didn't believe it. And he's told this story. How many of you heard this story before, right? He told his staff that there's no way there's 1,600 people, and he actually came into the room and saw 1,600 people. And that's what's keeping this going. And this is why it's so important that we actually make these commitments, and we'll get to that regarding this 1,200 action. And we're hoping that we're going to see some very important announcements at this action. Announcements on the programs that we have been working together on so that our congregations are actually aware that we're making progress, that we're making a difference in this historic moment. Part of that, so that's our October action. In November and October, we're going to be working on the GOTV efforts. I believe we're going to have a program at the Adams Center as a headquarters, and I'm going to ask Jeremy to come up for a second to mention the GOTV efforts. Oh, we're going to do that. I'm sorry. Aha, I appreciate that. Okay, so on Get Out the Vote, again, it's essential because of the impact that it's had. So that you know, one of the impacts it's had, and I like to mention this story always, is in Alexandria, the efforts of the Voice team out there has improved the voter turnout of the affordable housing places, where I was having a meeting this morning with one of the candidates that won. He got the third highest votes and beat out in the primary people who had been elected for years. He got the third highest votes, and guess how much money he raised? $10,000. It was the lowest amount of money that was raised, and he beat out incumbents because of get out the vote efforts. And he took no money from any of the developers. So September through November, get out the vote, Virginia official meetings, and the October 21st action. When we get to December, we start talking about keeping the deal. And here I want to invite Paul Douthit, who's our treasurer. Where's Paul? So that we are able to accomplish what we need to accomplish. And I want Paul to talk about the funds and the efforts.
And actually, James did not introduce himself during the rounds. So why don't you make your announcement, and then we'll have James come forward. Because the money that we've raised, we've actually hired our first organizer.
That's a very good segue into this whole thing. Yes, it is. So one of the other tenets of Voice we know is organize people. All of you in this room are the people, but also organize money. Our big campaign, which you're hearing about, is the Friends of Voice. Towards that, this year we have and you're going to get another chance to commit to this. So far this year, we've raised nearly $17,000 towards a goal of $45,000 of Friends of Voice. This is at least, $300, but we will accept anything that you can graciously give to us. Thank you very much for everyone who has already pledged, and everyone who has already given. If you haven't given yet, please do so, because James right there is the embodiment of how our organized money plays itself out. And if you haven't pledged or given yet, many opportunities coming forward. On the pledge card is another one. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Paul. James, why don't you come up and introduce yourself?
The fruits of your fundraising. Good afternoon, Voice. My name is James Pearlstein, and I've been an organizer with you for like 2 weeks now. It's good to be here. I'm going to keep this very brief. I look forward to getting to know more of you in person. So I'm new to Voice. I am not new to the IAF. So I've been with the IAF for 9 years and was an organizer with WIN in DC. You all know these, your neighbors around here. And then I was the lead organizer in Montgomery County. And my family and I recently moved back after having been the lead organizer in Cleveland in Cuyahoga County. So, and prior to that, spent 10 years as a frontline youth worker in the Berry Farms public housing neighborhood before coming to organizing. So look forward to making trouble with you all and kicking up some dust here in Northern Virginia.
Awesome. Thank you very much. Yes, Marjorie.
Just make a personal appeal for everybody to consider donating as much as you can. I have been working with other people in Arlington to organize in the Latino community, and we really, really need an organizer, a Spanish-speaking organizer. We are 2/3 of the way there in terms of raising the funds to hire somebody. We've identified somebody who would be great. If we can get all the way there, we can have the Spanish-speaking organizer we need in Arlington as well as other jurisdictions in Northern Virginia. So keep that in mind, please, when you consider your donations for the year.
Thank you very much, Marjorie. And as part of, Marjorie's been leading a great effort in Arlington with Pat and others on affordable housing and schools and things like that. So again, when we get to the commitment part, make sure to think about that. Also, another part of the commitment part and part of our plan for the December period is signing up 225 people. We really need to make sure that we've got people that are showing up daily at the General Assembly. And we can't do that if our organizations and institutions haven't signed up the people to be able to go down there. And you can imagine if you've got 10 people in purple shirts showing up at all the different delegates' offices or all the different assemblies and hearings and whatnot, how much of an impact that's going to make in addition to the leadership that are meeting with the officials. You know, we had leadership meeting with Brian Moran, who was the Secretary of Public Safety this week. We had leadership meeting with the Attorney General, with the Governor. So in addition to the General Assembly, how much of an impact it'll make to tell the Governor and the Executive, hey, we've got people showing up at the legislature to push for these things that we're asking you to jump on board on. Yes?
I don't remember how many years ago, a number of years ago, a whole bus, several busloads of people with yellow shirts and white shirts showed up, backed up the need for having affordable dental care kept in the budget, which Governor King said he would try, but of course we needed to have votes too. And just our presence and people seeing our yellow shirts everywhere is one of the reasons that in a tough budget year, you got that. You got that.
Absolutely. And another instance was in Arlington recently when we had, you know, what was it for affordable housing, I think it was, when we had a bunch of people just kind of helping to fill the hall, and it really made an impact there. So thank you, Linda. Now getting down to January and February, we're keeping the deal, and that's what we're talking about. Yes?
One thing that Alisa asked me to mention is that on the back of this, if you have knowledge, if you know your delegates, write their name.
Let's get to it on the commitment part, because I'm trying to really rush forward, because we're about to have the prayers at 4:45, and Carla will jump in on the relational meetings for those of us that are not going to be observing the prayer. So in January and February, keeping the deal and being down at the General Assembly and actually being there to not only get to know what's happening in our legislature and where our delegates are, but to actually influence and help make policy and make a difference. Alisa talked about this being a historic moment. This is a moment for our country that we have an opportunity as voice, as leaders in our communities to make a difference in Virginia and be a shining example for the rest of the nation. And this is the opportunity to do so. So this is why it's so important that you're aware of this plan and actually have all of your commitments and people involved. And I'm going to stop right here. If you are going to be observing the prayer with us, you're welcome to do so. We just ask that when you go to the back to remove your shoes and to sit at the back of the prayer hall. I'm going to be going there to make prayer. And for those of us that are not going to be joining, Carla will have a program here going on.
Before we have a relational meeting time, any reactions to the 3-month plan, action plan that SAFE just talked about?
I think it's a great plan. It's very important that we continue to strive to do that. One of the things I saw on Instagram not too long ago, so I don't know if but there was something I saw on Instagram saying you cannot have $1 million dream with a minimum wage work ethic. Which means you have to put the work in. You've got to be intense. So it's not really talking about money, but you can't have these big dreams, but you don't put any work in. And so you have to be willing to put the work in to get the results and successes we want. And that's going to take commitment, but I think we're right on with what we're asking.
Any other reactions? Yes.
Well, just to follow up on what the Savage said, there's a difference between a dream and a goal. We can dream, but in order to make it real, we have to set goals, which I think we are.
Yes.
Once again, more of a question than a statement. I might have missed this from not listening well, but in the third month, November, I guess, is what we mean by third month. Okay, so what's not clear to me is after the election, after we've done the get out the vote and so on, is there something specific or focus that we're planning on that we should all be getting ready to do in November, December? What did I forget?
Just to reiterate. So in October, do I need this? Okay. In October is the action. And in October, we're also working on our turnout for GOTV, but we're asking you to have those commitments done by the action. And they're going to talk more about GOTV in a little bit afterwards and hand out the maps and so we can look at it. But it's going to be a very hard year to be recognized for Get Out the Vote work because of District 10. And so at the action, we're going to actually take a lot of time for people to do their turnout numbers in front of the governor, in front of our state officials, in front of the press. So we're working turnout now for both. At the action, we're going to ask people to take commitments for Richmond. And then in November, we're going to be doing GOTV. And the team is going to lay that out after prayer, what that's going to look like. So in November, on Election Day and the 3 days before election, we're going to be doing GOTV. Okay? Then we're going to be focused, again, on recruitment for the General Assembly, but also maybe relaxing a little bit. There's something called Thanksgiving and Christmas, for those of you who celebrate Hanukkah, and also asking people to give. So as Paul laid out, we've raised a third of the money of Friends of Voice. November and December are the best months to ask people to give, and so we're asking you to give, but also to think about who also wants to donate to the work that we're doing. And then in January, we're going to be in Richmond. And as was laid out, our goal is to have 10 people there each day, but as Reverend Olson Peoples also mentioned, there may be a couple of hearings where we need to say, look, Voice, we know you signed up for this day, but all hands on deck. And we're going to try to get as many people out to Richmond as possible because we need to do a big event. So that's what January is going to look like. So those are the next 3 months. Is that clear?
Yeah, I have a question on the commitment card. Maybe getting into this in the future, but it talks about key state politicians and talks about C lists. But we see no lists. So
right. So Robert has lists. If you want the list for your jurisdiction, see Robert. And
but it says C list for the key state politicians, and I don't know who is considered a key state politician.
So again, Robert has the list, and he'll give you that list for your jurisdiction. Okay.
Oh, Jeremy?
And for those lists, can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Yeah, for those lists themselves, the key ones are the ones that we haven't met with yet. So right now, it's basically we have a separate list for Prince William, a separate list for Fairfax, Arlington, and Alexandria. For the most part, those have already been completed this year. So if you're interested in doing that, we'll have them on this back table on your way out.
Let's give a hand to Arlington and Alexandria for having met with all of their key state delegates and senators already. Leading the way. Okay, good. No more other questions. I'm going to hand it over to Carla.
Okay, for the next, should we say 10 minutes? We're going to, I'm going to ask you to turn to someone you do not know and each take 5 minutes to talk about how are you feeling called to act and why. And about halfway through, I will ask you to switch in case you haven't. So find someone you don't know. How are you feeling called to act and why?
So what we typically do in a masjid, a mosque, to get people's attention is we say, Assalamu alaikum, which means peace be upon you. And the response would be, Wa alaikum assalam, and peace be upon you. So, Assalamu alaikum. All right. Thank you very much. So we've just concluded the afternoon prayer. And just very quickly, for those of you that were observing, there's 2 prayers. We do 5 prayers a day. The 2 prayers that are the noon and the afternoon are quiet prayers, and the rest would be a loud prayer where the leader of the prayer would be reciting the Quran out loud. So for those of you that were observing and it was quiet, it's because this is the second quiet prayer that we have during the day. So continuing with our program, where is Jeremy? He's already up here. So we're going to have Jeremy talk about our Get Out the Vote efforts. And if Jeremy could just start with a quick Alexandria update, because I think that's just a great place to... I always love this Alexandria thing because this candidate that I'm happy won. But Jeremy.
Nonpartisan, of course, but when the candidate attends your mosque, then
Yeah. So we'll share that in a minute, Safe. I just want to ask a quick question for the room. And can anyone hear me if I talk like this? All right. I don't. No. Mike's better. Okay. Okay. So I have a question for everyone in the room. Who here did GOTV with voice last year? That's a good percentage. Okay. So I have another ask then. Even if you did not do GOTV last year, if you could partner up with someone that you currently do not know and spend the next 3 to 5 minutes, we'll time it, talking about your favorite experience last year doing GOTV, and if you did not do GOTV, why it is important for yourself or why you think it's important to vote. From there, we'll jump into how we're going to be doing this year. So, meet somebody new. It's okay. It's not a high school dance. You can get up and talk to people. All right, folks, we're going to come back together real quick and pass the mic around. So, who wants to share their favorite experience from GOTV last year or why they said it was important to be able to vote?
I'm Connie from Florist Methodist. I'm really excited about Get Out the Vote. Last year, it was raining, and we were at some apartment units across from Hutchison Elementary, and the really cool thing was we got to say, you're going to vote right there. That's the school. It's going to open at 6:30. What time are you going to vote? And they were like, oh, I don't know. Oh, you know, it opens at 6:30. It's open until whenever it was open. And so, okay, maybe you know what? I'll go and vote before I go to work. What a great idea. Okay, then you're going to commit to that? Yeah, I will. So it was just the individual talking, and because it was nonpartisan, people were so accepting. They were so nice when they answered the door. I loved it.
Any other stories, favorite parts people want to share?
Okay, well, so the first time I went with a friend. She looked just like me. Do you think the doors opened? No, the doors did not open. Because we were in neighborhoods where people didn't vote. And, you know, it's like me. I could be a social worker knocking on the door. I could be ICE. I could be whatever. Just typical American girl, lady. And so the next time around, I told everybody, this doesn't work. And so then, I think it was Jeremy or someone at the next time I went, they said, you need to go with not your friend, you need to go with someone who does not look like you. What do you think happened then? The doors opened. The doors opened. I went with a man who's Muslim. The doors opened. We had the best dialogue. We got along. We bonded. It was the best experience. It was wonderful for various reasons. I suggest you go with someone very different from you. Get to know your neighbor.
I appreciate that, and I'm sure my buddy Talal, who you walked with, would also appreciate that, but I will not tell him that you said such kind words.
Kurt Deerdorf from Florist United Methodist. We knocked on doors, but I also went down to El Nor, to the mosque, to work on the phone banks. And so I made probably 100 phone calls, like 2 people answered the phone, and I left lots of messages. But there were 2 young girls there, I'd say 16, and they were sending text messages. And we were going in, and if we got a positive response, we were doing stroke tallies. And those girls were just knocking it out of the park with these stroke tallies of all the people who were responding to the text messages. So phone banks, text messages, yes.
I'm Margaret, I'm his wife, and we, one of the most interesting things to me about GOTV was the look of amazement on people's faces when they found that we were not telling them who to vote for. They were rather shocked, I think, that people would come out and simply ask them to vote, to exercise that right and privilege.
Thank you. So every single story that somebody shared wasn't about how many people they got to go vote. It wasn't about the numbers of voter percentage turnout. It was about the experience that you had with another person, which is interesting when we're talking about why we do GOTV. So before I jump into the full, if everyone has that piece of paper in front of you, all right, I'm going to invite Hillary up to say a couple things about how her GOT experience was last year, and then we're going to jump into some of this.
Hi, Voice. I was the one that won one of the T-shirts that got autographed, so that's why Jeremy asked me to say a few things. Why do we get with Voice and do this? Why don't we just go in our backyard and work with whatever our party is locally? Well, in my instance, it's already a high turnout district, and the results are actually predictable. So that would be kind of a waste of my time. So last year, I went to Fairfax and Manassas, even though I live in Arlington, because we want to do it with voice. We want to have an impact. And my door-knocking story is when we said to people, did you know that your precinct is one of the lowest turnout precincts? They said, what? How would they know that? And then when you said, so do you think your elected officials care what you think if you don't go to the polls? They got that. And they loved what Voice stood for, what our issues were. So we need to have maximum impact this year. And we need to do this not only with how many volunteers we can recruit, and it is a fantastic experience. It's a great introduction to Voice, I found, with the people I brought. But we also have to cover all our shifts. So we really need to work together and make our maximum impact.
Thank you, Hillary. Yes.
I've had elected officials tell me that they pay attention to it, and you know why? It's not so much that they expect those vote turnouts to help elect them. They realize we can turn out votes to help defeat them. Right. When they see we know how to turn out votes, they pay attention. And they told me that.
I forgot to say what force we were not. So infrequent voters, that's what we target.
So when Voice does, I'm going to be writing stuff, so I'm going to do that. Oh, thank you. So when Voice does GOTV, the reason why we do it is not to influence an election. Right. When we say we're being nonpartisan, we truly mean we're being nonpartisan. We do GOTV to demonstrate power. Right. And in order for us to demonstrate power, we need to make sure we are where people are watching. The proposal that you have in front of you is only covering District 10. The reason why it's only covering District 10 is not because we're trying to swing District 10 one way or another. It's because every single politician in the state of Virginia, local and national politicians and national media are looking at District 10. They're not looking at District 11. They're not looking at District 1. It is the one race that's going to have any news coverage. So if we want to be viewed as power players in Northern Virginia and in Virginia, we have to be in District 10 when the spotlight is in our backyard. So that's the first part of this when you're looking at this. I'm going to take until the 519 mark you gave me earlier. The other part that makes us different than other groups is we're not professional campaigners. Everyone here lives here. This is our parents, this is our neighborhood, this is our backyard. And what that means is that you're actually connected to these communities. And by being connected to Voice, you're connected to every single community that's on this list. None of them are more than 6 miles away from one of a Voice institution. Some are closer. For example, Baldwin is less than a mile from Pastor Savage's church. The two ones that we have in Sterling are right next to Adams. They're less than 2 miles from Adams, which is the second largest mosque.
Just an update. Adams leadership voted, and they want to be the headquarters for Saturday and Sunday for GOTV. They're going to support to match the number of leaders that Voice turns out.
So, yes, thank you, Lisa. So what that covers then, too, is us making sure that we can flex this muscle going into That is incredibly important for us to be able to demonstrate our power locally. If we have good turnout this year, we're able to flex it to make it larger next year. Yes?
I don't understand if someone's really focused on District 10, how are we going to measure whether that voice has?
That's a good question. So this year,
just repeat it.
Yeah, so the question was, how are we going to measure our impact? Last year, if you remember, we were able to calculate the percentage based off the number of volunteers we had and go from there. This year, because you have millions of dollars coming in from partisan groups on each side of the aisle into District 10, quite frankly, we're not going to be able to measure that. It's to demonstrate power. By us being there, and I'm going to paint the picture for you right here, I guess for the entire group. When we take the commitment to do GOTV in front of the governor, and in front of potentially Speaker Cox, and in front of potentially both candidates for District 10, and they see how many people are going, and they see as soon as you commit, you put on a purple voice shirt, and they see that room filled, that's going to stay with them for longer than us ever bringing a spreadsheet and showing them numbers. The other part, too, is that it strengthens us internally, in which, as everyone was saying, it's about the experience. You get to work with somebody not from your institution, somebody from a different religion, of a different race, of a different gender, and that strengthens us and puts us in a better position and more relational across our lives.
The other reason why we're doing it differently this year, too, in order to get recognition, as Sharon, you asked, last year we did over many, many days. And we had 15 or 50 at each side. This time we're doing 4 days, so we can do 100 on each day, and on election day our goal is 400. Again, we're not going to measure it by statistics, but we're going to be visible. People get in large numbers.
And the last part as well, statistically speaking, in a congressional seat, significantly more people than a local state senate or state district.
Yeah, it's not a question, it's a comment. The numbers this time, because you can't really tell so easily how many voted we influenced, the numbers of workers is as an important measure.
That's right.
So seeing, particularly putting that again up front in front of the elected officials and having them see that. Paul.
Another reason how it, a concrete way that it shows our power. Remember, there's also a delegate and senate in District 10, and those are also the ones that we're focusing. We talked earlier of having relational meetings with them. Get out the vote is also targeting those people as well to show both our support, but also for them to be aware of what are the issues that voice brings.
Good point. So for the sake of time, I'm going to just run through a couple of things that are very important for logistics. If people have questions, please feel free to come talk to me during caucus, talk to Alisa or any of the other organizers as well afterwards. As Lisa said, our shifts are going to start the Saturday before the election and run through election day. The online sign-up, similar to what we did last year, will be sent out in an email tomorrow morning, in which you'll be able to receive it then. We're looking for, again, AM shifts and PM shifts on Saturday, Sunday after church, Monday availability probably in the evening, potentially door knocking and also phone banking, and then Tuesday all day whenever people are available. We said earlier, GOTV is also a fantastic way for us to get new people involved in voice internally. I can't tell you the number of people in the Alexandria and Arlington institutions for the first time they were involved with voice, and we've been able to keep them. And the last part is in District 10, 40% of the entire population is in Loudoun County, and Loudoun County is continuing to get more populated. What that means, if we want to matter in regards to power in the state of Virginia, we're going to have to do a couple precincts in Loudoun. The 2 precincts we picked are in Sterling directly. They are close to Florist, they are close to Trinity, they're close to some of the Fairfax institutions, and as I said, they're already within 2 miles of Adams. That should put us in a position where we can go into Loudoun and start having a presence there that we currently don't have, building our power for the longer term, particularly going into 2019. And with that, I think I'm a minute over.
There's a couple questions.
Okay. Any other questions before we jump to the next?
Like the addresses of the gathering place, and
yes,
usually comes later.
Yeah, so that'll be sent out, but basically for the most part we're going to be meeting at Adams, as Alisa said, for the Fairfax and the Sterling locations, and at one of the Manassas churches, so whether that's First Baptist or Bull Run, depending on the day. Other questions?
Did you say there was a phone bank as well?
We'll be doing a phone bank on the Monday evening beforehand. However, phone banking really does not work statistically. And it also doesn't give us a presence. If we're doing this to build our power and to be seen in our backyard doing GeoTV, phone banking doesn't do that.
So we would do phone banking on Monday, just because it's going to be the evening, and it'll be dark by then. The calls that we would make, if we do end up doing phone banking that night, would be to people whose doors we already knocked on. It's the only way that it's effective. So if someone from Boise is at your door or calling you to remind, cold calls don't work. The other thing you might want to think about are people, if you can do the research beforehand, who are your members who live in District 10? That can be very effective as well. So we'll call the people whose doors we knocked on, or your own members who live in District 10. Thanks for the thing, Jeremy. He's done a lot of work.
District 10 is gerrymandered like crazy, so you're looking for people who live in the Centerville and Chantilly areas. Okay? And right outside Herndon Resting, but not in, because they come around it. Alright? And Prince William is Manassas and the surrounding areas there. Cool. Thank you guys.
So we call you Mr. GeoTV? Pardon? So we call you Mr. GeoTV?
No, but
This has been a great discussion. GeoTV is a really good example of why turnout is so important. And we also have our October action coming up. So I have invited Lisa Foll, Pat Vendikaloo, and Kurt Deerdorf. The three of you come up. We're going to have to cut it a little short, maybe each spend about a minute sharing some of their favorite turnout strategies. And this is just to get the pump going while they're coming up. I don't know if Pat's here. Let me just say this too. We've been hearing some language that will help us in looking at the action and turnout. You've been hearing, this is our moment. I'm going to say it again. This is our moment. This is our moment to lead in Virginia and nationally on criminal justice reform, schools, and keeping families together. And it actually gives us some words that we can use as we talk about the action going forward. Okay, whoever wants to go first.
Kurt Deerdorf, florist. And so 1 minute, huh? All right. So the key question is, how do we convince people that this is an important way to spend their afternoon on Sunday afternoon? And how do you get the message to them in a consistent way? So I will just say we're blessed with a pastor who's very persuasive. So we're going to ride that horse as much as we can. But we have basically a four-phased approach. One from the pulpit. We want information on the website. We have a thing called the e-note that comes out on Thursday afternoon, which is an opportunity to convince people this is important. And also, we had a very good turnout in 2017. We want to contact those folks by email and say, hey, folks, another opportunity. This is really important. This is an important agenda. Please come. So that's what we're going to do.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Pat from UUCA. Our core team keeps a list of everybody who's ever come to an action. So we now have a list of hundreds of people, so, and how many times they came. So that's one of the things we do. And of course, we have online newsletter, and Mark will be putting something in every single week with a link of how you register. We get mentioned in the pulpit, of course. And then between services, like many of you, we have a voice table. And so this is can we just put that on the table? So this year, we are doing a theme that we did before called Get on the Bus. And we're using that again. And that even though everybody doesn't go on the bus, it's still Get on the Bus for Justice. And if you sign up, you get a little bus sticker to put on your name tag. And also, one of our core team made a little flyer that's strictly for UUCA, but it's something that could be adapted for anybody. Thanks.
We use a lot of all of those same strategies, but I'm going to highlight two that we focus on the most. The first is that the Jewish community is lucky because we have the high holidays that come right before the action. So our Rabbi Holzman, uses that as an opportunity to use it as a call to action. He is very effective, as any of you know who have seen him speak, what an effective speaker he is. If you haven't seen him before, this year our high holidays were broadcast on YouTube, and you can find the night before Yom Kippur at the 1 hour 50 mark. You can hear what he had to say to us because it was very inspiring and motivating. The other thing that we do is that we spend all year building relationships in our community, so that when we get to the point of having the action and we need to have people come out, they've already created that connection to us and understand why it's important to be at the action to help us with our numbers. So those are our two key strategies.
Thank you, Lisa, Kurt, and Pat. Thank you. Nice. Anyone want to add? We just have maybe like a minute to add what you think is effective. Yes, Linda.
Actually walking around and going up to people and personally inviting them to go with you and getting their name and commitment.
Daisy Day.
Can we give us an example of how you would invite someone? Can you invite one of your neighbors to the action?
Well, Chris, I'm going to this exciting action, and the governor is going to be there, and I want us to be there so that he sees all of us together, telling him what people of faith care about. And he's going to see Muslim and Jewish and Catholic and African American and Baptist, and he needs to see some Unitarian Universalists. Will you come with me?
Hey, that's very good. Okay, and I think Lisa has something to add.
No, I was just going to say, turn to your neighbor. Invite your neighbor to the action right now. Let's just practice it, okay? From everything that you've heard.
Does everybody have one of these? Pick it up and hold it up in the air. All right, so this is the individual commitments. And if you'll allow me, I'm going to talk about how I commit. And for me, there's a verse in the Quran that says God does not change the status of a people until they change the status of themselves. And unless we're ready individually to change and make that difference, we're not going to see change in our society. So if you look at the card, it starts obviously with your name and your institution. And there are different elements or actions which you can volunteer your time for. Now, what I want to mention is Khadija from Dar Nur mentioned earlier that the 11:16 obviously on the floor team is incorrect. That should be 10:16. And the time that we need the floor team there is 1:15 p.m. for that action.
So let me just clarify. So the day of the action, we want the floor team to arrive at 1:15. Okay? The day of the action. We need a large floor team, probably about 40 to 50.
We're going to be about 40 to 50. So the turnover rate this year is going to have to be faster because there's a church that's using the room before us. So they're leaving, so the floor team's going to be there prepping everything to bring in before we can get into the room.
What do we have to do? So we'll be handing out.
Yeah, so the floor team, they're the stage managers basically. They're the ones who make everything run behind the scenes. So that is making sure we have all the t-shirts, all the package papers put out on the tables. They're the ones who direct people to the right direction. They're the people who know the space beforehand. They're the ones that make sure the candidates are able to get in without being harassed. You're the mix of the voucher and the stage manager.
And so because of that, we asked if at all possible that you come to the dress rehearsal. And that is going to be on the 16th, October 16th at Fairfax High School.
Not November 16th.
Not November. And that's so you can get a sense of the actions before the day of. It's also a lot of fun. You get to be a part of helping to plan the actions.
What time will this be?
That'll be from 7 to 9.
How many here think that they want to do the floor team? Just so we can get an idea. Okay. All right, good. So the other thing that's on here is the GOTV strategy, and that includes working with Mr. GOTV. I'll make that stick. Mr. GOTV and company. And also we've got key state politicians. You know, Robert has been working very closely in setting up meetings, and we've actually got some coming up this week with our delegate here in this area. That's a great thing to be a part of and to get to know people. And I think you wanted to say something about the back of the card.
I was going to say, if you happen to know your delegate, and you have some contact with him, write his or her name on the back of the commitment sheet.
So if you know your state delegate or any other official or politician in your area, go ahead and write their name and contact information on there. And finally, also on the communications team. You know, this is also something, if you're interested in communications, if that's something that you want to be involved in voice communication, voice-wide communications, that's also a great thing. I think I'm going to volunteer some of our people for that. We've got a great communications team here at Al-Hijrah, and they haven't finished our flyer yet, but they'll get it done. And finally, we had Paul talk about the Friends of Voice. Where's Paul? Okay, so this is important for what Paul talked about. And if you feel like you can make that commitment today, that's excellent. Please do so. And I'm going to open up for 1 minute of questions. No questions? That's great. Carla, over to you.
Hey, we're doing okay with our time. Okay, now.
Right after we're done. Before you leave. And when we're making commitments, should they be something that we really dream to do, or should it be something that is possible? Or what is the mix there?
Well, the individual commitment is individual commitment. I think what you're talking about is what Carla's about to get into. So if you're about to make individual commitments, please submit your commitment card before we leave.
Okay, moving on to institutional commitments. Jeremy has put up some, you'll see around the room, these are the commitments that institutions made at the July Voice-Wide Action, and you'll see starting over here on the left, Alexandria, Arlington, Fairfax, and then Prince William is over here. Right now, the totals are 897 for the action, and if you remember, our goal is 1,200, so we're shy of that goal, and 292 for get out the vote, and our goal is 450. So in just a minute, I'm going to ask you to caucus with your institutions about the numbers. If you have not stated your turnout number yet, we need you to do that today, and there'll be a chance to do that here at the end. If you realize that your number is too high, after talking with your team, let us know. And if you think that your number can be higher, you'll have a chance to report out. So your job right now is to look at what your commitments were for the action and get out the vote, and then caucus with your team. You want to say about 2 minutes? About 2 minutes if those are the numbers you're going to go with.
What Jeremy was saying, I thought you were going to talk about, is turn to your neighbor. This is our moment.
This is our moment.
This is our moment. And so when you think about your turnout commitments, please keep that in
Oh, yes, I forgot to talk about that. For a small institution, that's what that means. There's a range, medium, large. The bottom, though, this is what Lisa was telling me, that actually it doesn't matter how large an institution is. If it's well organized, the sky's the limit as far as how many you can turn out. Okay, take 2 minutes and caucus with your institutions about your numbers.
333. 1,234. So means if you're going to turn out 50 people, how many yeses do you need?
I invite Dr. Savage to close us in prayer.
Yeah, can I have one last thing? So you're thinking about your turnout for this action. The large statewide action is one of the most impressive things that Voice does for new people. Think about the right people as well, not just butts in a seat. Pardon for that, not just people in a seat. Think about who has to be there in order for you to build the voice power in your institution and for Voice to build our power statewide.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Give yourselves a hand. Thank you for making time for what is right. We can make time all the time for everything that doesn't really matter, but thank you for making time for what's going to matter, not just for you, but for the legacy you'll leave for caring for somebody else. Let us pray. Almighty God, you are great. You are magnificent, you are powerful, you are eternal. And we thank you that you thought it not robbery to call us to the work of caring for our neighbors, making us see one another as you see us, your creation. Help us to put aside partisanship and proclivities that put blinders on our hearts and our minds and our souls. Help us to make a commitment to go forth in a vision that you have placed within us, that we might care for the least and the greatest, the poorest, the hungry, the orphan, the homeless, those who feel left out and those who have been kicked out. We ask that you would help us to put our hands to the plow that we might do the work of justice. It brings about a surety in people's hearts and minds that hope is real, that love is real, that you are real. And so as we leave this place, we leave commissioned to do the good work, to do what is right, what is just, what is holy. We thank you for this day's grace. You are great, and you are greatly to be praised. Send us with your traveling mercies, with your presence and your power, to not do good work, but to do great work to represent you. This is our prayer and our praise. In your name we pray. Amen.
One last round of applause.